Go?
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of the Full Potential Live Show. I'm your host, Nick Wagner Sr., and I'm thrilled to be joined today with Chelsea Haines. So Chelsea, thank you for making time to join the show.
Of course, it's an honor to be here.
And Chelsea, we'll get into it, but Chelsea's a world traveler. So she's in a new location as of maybe a couple weeks ago, right? So pretty
Last
recent.
week.
Last week. So where in the world is Chelsea? We'll have to play that game.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're recording this live and we're sharing this, as we just mentioned, on LinkedIn and YouTube, which I do every Sunday night, and I share a different career story with an awesome guest that I either know personally or I meet through other people. And like Chelsea and I, it's funny. Chelsea and I met through social media, which I think people always laugh about. And they're like, wait, you meet people through social media? And the answer is yes, I do. And I've met some awesome people through social media. So we'll record this tonight, and then we'll make sure we share this on my YouTube page and my Full Potential podcast as well. And as I mentioned before we started, I will make sure to link to Chelsea's coaching page, which you'll learn all about tonight, and Chelsea's LinkedIn, so you can get in touch with her after the show if you have more questions, which I'm thinking you might after we go through her really unique career story. So we're going to do two things tonight, Chelsea. We're going to talk about your career story, which I think is really just all very different from a lot of traditional career stories, which is what originally, it kind of interested me in talking to you. So we'll definitely talk about that. And then I want to pivot to talk about something I think we've talked about over I think LinkedIn, but the power of saying no, and why is saying no so difficult, and why is it so powerful at the same time? So we're going to talk about both of those things tonight. So we have a jam-packed agenda. So why don't we start with your career, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
I'd love to know. So say you meet someone for the first time and they ask you, who is Chelsea Haines and what do you do? How do you explain that?
I've tried to get better at answering this question. And as of right now, I am a full-time health coach, and I just recently transitioned off of working full-time as a yacht stewardess. I've been doing that for the last 5 years. I was a yoga teacher and stewardess on board private super yachts. And starting in November is when I transitioned full-time into my health coaching business, which I'd kind of launched more as like a hobby over the last year and a half. And now I've gone full-time doing that. So
I have so many questions, including what is a super yacht and what you do working on a super yacht. So we'll get into that. But I actually want to kind of rewind a little bit, because, you, from looking at your LinkedIn and from our conversations, you didn't go to school to be a health coach. You didn't go to, originally, right? Way back when you went to college, you didn't go to school, I'm guessing to, with the intention of working on yachts. You went to school for psychology.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, like, how did you end up going to college for psychology? What was the genesis to that, and how did that happen? If we kind of rewind your life here a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So if we reel it back, I graduated high school back in 2004, and I went to a very competitive private college prep high school, and I was on paper very sellable. I was captain of all the sports teams that I did. I was on probably every academic team or whatever that you could be a part of. I was like involved with everything. Ran for student council. I did the International Baccalaureate program, which is kind of like AP classes, but on crack. It's a whole 2-year program, junior and senior year of high school. So by the end of high school, I was really burnt out. Is the moral of the story. And when it came to college applications, it really just boiled down to one day I kind of had a little bit of a breakdown, and I had 7 applications in front of me to very prestigious schools in New England. And I just had this feeling like, I don't want to do this for another 4 years. I want to go to a school that the weather is beautiful and I'm going to enjoy where I'm at and do something that I really enjoy learning about, and that's human behavior. So without ever seeing the College of Charleston, it came to me literally like a whisper in the wind. I heard about the school, I applied. I knew I would get in based on my SAT scores and all of the things. And I got in on an early application, and then I went to go see the school on spring break. I knew I was going there already. And luckily it worked out, and College of Charleston was amazing. So again, I was really burnt out. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. But when it came time to actually paying for school and really understanding the weight of many more years of education ahead of me, I just intuitively knew that that was not what I wanted to do. You know, I came from a broken family. My dad left when I was 12 years old. My mom had to file bankruptcy. We were homeless and didn't obviously have a lot of money to go around. So finances were tight. And in my mind, I had the foresight, whether I realized it or not at the time, to not indebt myself financially and energetically for the next 12 years of my life. So that's why I ended up going to College of Charleston, South Carolina, and studying psychology, because it was a beautiful place and great weather. And again, I wanted to study human behavior, and something that I remember specifically telling myself, well, I'm not going to do medicine anymore. So I want to study something that I'm going to enjoy. And to me, what's more fascinating than learning about human beings?
So I think that's really interesting for two reasons. Like, so was the expectation from your mother that you were always going to college, or was that a decision that she left up to you?
I would say my mom left it up to me. I think it was just always, you grow up. I was born in the 80s, and I just grew up thinking that the American dream was to go to college and get married and have 2.5 kids and a white picket fence. And then someday when you're 80 years old, you'll be happy. And I learned from a very young age that that was not what I wanted, because I saw that quote unquote American dream fail so desperately in my own family. And yeah, it's been a journey of really just trusting my gut and breaking down all those barriers to entry that, with good intention, my teachers, my guidance counselors, my sports coaches, and of course, even my mom, who's just always been supportive of anything that I've ever wanted to do, has led me down that certain path of go to school, get a good career, and make a lot of money and be able to retire someday. But it was very clear, 4 years later, then when I graduated college in 2008 was, besides the last few months, the closest, most recent massive economy crash. So by the time here I am graduating college, and companies are laying people off left and right, and there were no jobs to be had. So I had to get really creative right off the bat. I've always been a hard worker. I put myself through college, worked as a bartender all the way through school, paid my tuition off. But yeah, I had to get savvy right away. So I think the experience of choosing to trust my intuition and choosing the path of happiness that might be the less walked path has led me inadvertently now to where I am all the way, 12 years later.
and so back, I just want to pause for 1 second. So you mentioned human behavior. Was there an experience or an event in your life that made you realize that human behavior was something that you were passionate about and that you wanted to study it? Or was it almost to your point, like the pivot from being a doctor to, you wouldn't maybe be a practicing doctor and go to school for 12 years, but this would be something that would still fulfill, a lot of maybe your curiosity?
Yeah, I think experiencing massive childhood trauma at a very young age, which formed many of the beliefs of my life, which is something now that I'm extremely passionate about, is helping people to really come down to the belief systems that we are operating on and where those beliefs are no longer serving us as adults. And I think intuitively, even when I was, 18, 19, and then 20, freshman, sophomore in college, trying to figure out my major, I ended up minoring in business entrepreneurship. I intuitively knew that these things that I enjoyed, I wanted to work for myself, I wanted to have my own business, and I wanted to study human behavior. I think also maybe to understand a little bit more about maybe what had happened in the dynamic between my parents and then how that affected my brother and I. I do think maybe at the time, it probably wasn't a conscientious thought, but maybe in hindsight, reflecting back, there was definitely some subconscious need to understand on a deeper level what the hell happened.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, just how, and to your point, maybe it wasn't as obvious to you at the time, but your life experiences ended up kind of guiding you towards this path of going to school for psychology and then ultimately helping people. So I just find that so interesting.
Yeah.
So you mentioned 2008 in the Great Recession, not a good time to be graduating from college and finding a job. So what did you do, right? So, you graduate from school in 4 years, which is great. So what was your first job out of school? How did you find your first job?
Yeah, of course I had been bartending that whole time. So I had that like money coming in. But as far as my first day job, I was working as a outside sales reps or outside and inside sales rep for a new company. So I really enjoy obviously interacting with people. The fact that I had a psychology degree gave me a really great understanding on how to communicate with people, which
Right.
really gives you a leg up when doing sales, because then the sales don't feel so slimy. It's really a genuine connection that you're making with people. And follow any great sales guru and they will tell
Right.
you to establish that relationship with somebody. So once I graduated college, at that time, I really thought that I wanted to go down the path of medical device sales. So at the time, I was still kind of dabbling in this world of medicine. But I mean, if we're going to really just keep it real, I just wanted to make a shit ton of money because I was sick of having to work really hard to pay the bills and operating from that place of deeply rooted scarcity, where seeing my mom having to file bankruptcy and lose our home was very traumatic at 12 years old.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I think, I was willing to work hard. I was willing to work multiple jobs, which I did. So I started working as a sales rep for a local boutique sunscreen company that a local doctor was trying to put out on the market. And it was a high-end sunscreen that we were selling to cancer centers and dermatologists and medical spas. So it was a really great experience, but then I got laid off within a year.
So it's interesting that, again, your childhood memories shape so much of who you are as an adult. And back to what you just said, you really just wanted to not have that financial insecurity that you dealt with as a kid. That was really what was driving you at this point. And I think I can't imagine what it was like at 12 to have that happen and lose your house and especially see your mother go through that, right? Because I'm sure that was very traumatic for her. And how did she explain that to her children? And how do you bounce back from that? So how did you get laid off pretty quickly from your job? How did you bounce back from that? Or was adversity something that you were just used to kind of overcoming at this point in your life from everything that happened as a kid? Like, because that, not every, I'll be honest with you, not everyone gets laid off in their career, right? So but it's not a fun thing to experience. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, it was a beautiful learning lesson. I mean, I think that initial, when my boss came in, and bless his heart, even to this day, I could tell that like his heart was breaking to have to let me go. But financially, they were not able to pay me salary anymore. It was trying to launch a company during the Great Depression. It just wasn't realistic. So I think the initial, I teared up in the office and I went home and I gave myself permission for the day to like put sweatpants on and cry. But, it didn't feel as heavy as other traumas that I've experienced. I had a best friend killed by a drunk driver in middle school. My first boyfriend ended up taking his own life in high school. So I felt like losing a job was nothing compared to losing my father and my home and all of our assets, and then also dear friends and loved ones at a very young age. So I think the resiliency that I had learned gave me just that gusto to be like, okay, well, now I need to get back out there. And again, I was grateful that I had the financial ability to also bartend. That was a skill that I had and honed in for many, many years. And, I felt financially at least like, well, no matter what, I have proof that I'm a really savvy, hardworking person. So I know I'm going to be okay. But, in hindsight now, we can connect the dots looking back. All of these lessons inevitably led me to where I am right now. And I ended up working for one more company, a similar situation. And it's amazing how the universe gives you the same lessons over and over until you finally learn them. I went to another sales job with another new company. It was a boutique sports drink this time, and another doctor trying to launch another company. It was like, at the time, it seemed so, this makes so much sense. I have the perfect experience. But again, within a few months, it was like, this isn't working.
Right.
So after that was when I kind of was like, all right, I have also a minor in business entrepreneurship. I think it's time I stopped playing small and I do my own thing. So the easiest way for me to do that at the time was to look into multi-level marketing companies and network marketing companies, because I didn't have the capital or even the passion or the idea to like just open a storefront of something that I really wanted to do. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet. So I was a haberdasher. I started doing custom men's clothes. So I was doing door-to-door sales, selling men's suits and shirts. And it was a great product. I made good money doing it. And then that led me to my next job, which was working as a technician for an eye doctor. So now here I am kind of looping back around, aligning myself back with the medical field. I was selling suits to this retina surgeon and specialist. And he said, do you have health insurance? I think you should come work for me part-time. And I worked for him for a few years, and that was a great opportunity. And then he was the one who really encouraged me to go become a yoga teacher. And that is when my life really started aligning with, I really just need to throw everything out the window that I think my life should look like and really just start trusting my heart. So it was amazing to see how everything led to me working for this one doctor who said, Chelsea, listen, I'm going to pay you for the next month. Quit now and go and do your yoga teacher training, because it is all that you talk about doing. So I'm kicking you out the door because I know you'll never leave.
So let's pause there for a second. Was yoga something that had been a part of your life for a long time before you met this doctor who convinced you to go do this? Like, explain that for us.
Yeah, my first yoga class was first semester freshman year of college, so 2004. Oh, wow. So I had always been an athlete, and my roommate at the time said, hey, the gym down the street, they have this yoga studio. Will you come check out a class with me? It's free your first time. And I was like, yeah, I'm an athlete, of course. Like, I got this. And I'll never forget that first class. The teacher came up to me, and I remember it was a male teacher. So I just felt kind of intimidated anyway. And I was obviously like really out of breath and breathing like an athlete. I was a runner. So I was breathing really heavily. And he came over to me and he said, you do sports, don't you? And I said, yeah. He said, you need to calm down and breathe deeper. And that was it. I was hooked after that, because now no longer was I like trying to just, master this yoga thing. It was I walked out of there so confused, like what just happened? So it wasn't until 2013 when I finally decided to take the leap and become a yoga teacher. And it was so funny because for years, I always thought, I'll never be a yoga teacher. Like, it just feels like too much responsibility. It's just not my path. And it's funny when we reflect back in our lives, and maybe you and anyone watching this can think back on times where we felt resistant towards something that was actually a calling for us.
You did it for 9 years before you became a certified instructor.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Wow, that's awesome. So this gentleman you worked for, this doctor you worked for, says go do this.
Yep.
And did you kind of look at him like, why are you telling me this? Are you crazy? Or did you finally just give in and say, okay, I'm going to try it?
Yeah, I knew it. Well, and in even more transparency, probably maybe 2 months before he finally said that, I had done ayahuasca for a weekend, and it was a very, very, very clear auditory message in my mind, whether you want to say it was from God or spirit or whatever. And the exact calling, or I'll say request, was you have to go to you have to go to Costa Rica and become a yoga teacher. Those are the specific requirements. And I remember thinking, like, kind of as I sobered up, like a couple of days later, and thinking, what the hell was that all about? But amongst that time, I was like having this conversation with like my higher self, or what, the people in the community would say, like, Mother Spirit was, well, how am I going to do that? And she gave me everything that I needed in order to make it happen. So at the time I was married, like every excuse that I had, she came back to me with an answer. So I literally had no excuses. So after that experience is probably when I used to, go back to work and talk about how I need to go to Costa Rica and become a yoga teacher. So I'm sure he finally just got sick of me talking about it one day. So when he finally said that, and on top of it, he said, I'm also going to pay you for the next month. Of course, I had found the program I wanted to do. It was a month-long intensive. I thought, well, I literally have no excuse. I'm basically going to be on paid leave to go to do this thing that I was called to do from somewhere deep inside my soul. that was fall 2013.
And what was the plan? So after you became a yoga instructor, what was your plan, or did you not have one at that time?
Yeah, at that point, I decided to throw all plans out the window. I started just teaching yoga locally, and very quickly my classes were a success. I think it was kind of like when I knew I was going to College of Charleston and I knew that it was right. I knew I couldn't fail. It ended up being the only school I applied to because I knew I wasn't going to fail at my application. It was the same thing with this. I knew that if I just put my effort in, my hard work, my ability to share my heart and soul and my vulnerability, that it wasn't going to fail. So I became a full-time yoga teacher very quickly. And within 2 years, I ended up quitting my bartending job. And that was also, those 2 years were, if you've ever taken a yoga class, or held space for anybody's process, you always end up learning something as well, right? So with every yoga class that I held space for, I also was speaking the words that I needed to hear. It's a very weird thing when you kind of drop into that space where now you're holding a container for other people's experience. At least for me, it kind of happens as I almost just get out of my own way and I let whatever I'm supposed to say. And it was very clear after 2 years that there were a few other things in my life that were no longer working. So this was where I really started my practice of saying no to all the bullshit in my life that I had said yes to out of fear. And I ended up, getting divorced in 2015. And then 6 months later, I was moving onto my first super yacht.
So we won't go through the divorce because I don't want to replay that for you. But let's talk about, so you're a successful yoga instructor. How do you end up on a super yacht? What is a super yacht? And what do you do as an employee of a super yacht? Those are my three questions I have for you, because I think most people listening have probably no idea.
Yeah. Well, and the beauty now, again, hindsight is everything. To reflect back, becoming a yoga teacher was the first step in really rewriting my whole life as I knew it. And, the divorce sucked. Divorces are traumatic. They all suck. Of course, it brought up, and I just share this because if you've experienced divorce, I don't want to just brush it under the rug. It's a traumatic thing. And of course, it brought up all the unhealed wounds that I had experienced from my parents' divorce. So I really allowed myself the time. Between my psychology degree, my now mentors and teachers and yoga experience, I knew I had to let myself go through that process. And I always say the only way through heavy emotions are straight through them. So it just got to a point where we were going our separate ways. It was very obvious. And we got married in love and we separated in love. As much as the logistics were a pain in the ass and it was very painful, we both knew that it was really the right thing to go our separate ways. So fast forward a few months. I moved out of that condo in February. Come June, again, it was that same very clear request from whatever power that is bigger than me. Like a lightning bolt driving down the street, it said, you have to move onto a boat. And I thought, well, what the hell does that mean?
I have the same question.
So it was so striking that I ended up pulling over and calling the only person who I knew how to help me. And that was a fellow yoga teacher who had been in the yachting industry for a while, and she had now gotten out. So private super yachts are large vessels typically owned by either a private family or sometimes owned by, I'll say, multiple investors. There are circumstances where a private yacht is owned by a company and there's a few main investors in it. I've only ever worked for families. Some of the boats that I've been on are also charter boats. So what that means is the boat gets rented out to other people who charter the boat out for a certain period of time. Right. And some of the other ones are only private use only. As a full-time employee on board, it's quite militaristic. There's a hierarchy from the captain down, and you have your different departments, and within your departments you have head of departments. So I worked my way up to head of the interior. It's known as chief stewardess quite quickly, because I got into the industry at 29 years old, which is relatively old for the industry. A lot of coworkers of mine were in their early 20s and did this in lieu of college, which I never regret my education, but reflecting back, man, I would have done yachting for a lot longer had I gotten into it at a younger age. So, imagine my first boat was 312 feet. It's 95 meters. It's just shy of a football field. There were 30 crew members and, split up between the departments. There were 3 chefs, 3 engineers. There's a captain. There's 10 interior. There's 10 deck crew. And it's, if you can imagine how much maintenance it takes, it's basically a floating hotel, with 30 people living on there full time. So there's cleaning and food and laundry and an entire engine room and an entire deck. In this case, it was 7 decks of maintenance. So full-time yacht work is very laborious. You're constantly cleaning or fixing or maintaining. I was very lucky in that I was in the right place at the right time. And again, I just followed that calling and I knew I was not going to be a failure. And the fact that I was a yoga teacher really gave me another added value to the program. And that was June where I started doing the research. By September 1st, I had sold all my belongings. I found a subletter for my apartment. I sold my car. I moved to Fort Lauderdale in a rental and with 1 suitcase and a backpack. And within 4 weeks, I was moving on to one of the most prestigious charter yachts in the industry, where I met my husband.
Wow, it's such an interesting story, and I think just for so many people, I think a lot of people think of cruise ships, right? And they know cruise ships, but when they think of yachts, they don't really realize that some of these things have 30 people on them taking care of them and working on them, right? So, what were you doing yoga on the yacht as well? Was that part of your actual work on the yacht?
Yeah, which I was super grateful for. So, if you can imagine, all of the crew on board have multiple roles, right? We are also the first responders in the case of an emergency. We're all firefighters. Most of the interior on this particular boat, because it was such a large and prestigious program, we all had secondary assets. So we had a hairdresser on board, we had a physical therapist, we had a massage therapist, and I was the yoga teacher, and there was a few others as well. But that time teaching yoga, both to the crew and to our guests on board, was my escape. And it was a really amazing, cool time of self-reflection. I mean, when we have guests on board, we work for 14 hours a day with a little bit of a break in between. If you really want to just dive into the logistics, get on Bravo TV and watch Below Deck. I mean, that's what we do. Yeah, but that time on the yoga mat really allowed me the headspace to be able to reflect, because if you can imagine living and working and socializing with the same group of people. I mean, this happened to be 30 people. Another boat that I was on, we only had 12 crews. So you become a very tight-knit family and you spend 24/7 together. So, and you're overworked and you're underslept and you're from all over the world. So most programs are very, very international, and unless they try to not be. But you deal with stress differently. Your mother tongue is different. So the way you communicate is different. And it's a relatively high stress environment. So that time on the yoga mat was an opportunity for me to step away from all of that. And it also allowed me to understand and perceive everything that was happening off the yoga mat from the perspective of the observer. So it really helped me to grow personally on a really deep level and say, all right, this is yoga off the mat, because yoga is the practice of not reacting, right? You practice getting into uncomfortable positions to feel the stimulus and stress, to learn how to breathe through it and choose to not engage with it and choose to not react with it. So you take those lessons off of the yoga mat, and when you are in stressful, tense, tight situations, you now have practice not engaging and stepping away from it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, because you were on the yachts for what, 4 years, five years. So how did you? I have no idea how you even possibly could have done this while working 14 hours a day. How did you realize you wanted to be a health coach, become a health coach, start a health coach business, and work 14 hours a day all at the same time? Like, how is that, all of that possible? And I want to just hear how you made that transition, because now you're doing health coaching full time, which you've been doing since, I think you said last fall, right? Yep. So How do you do that? Like, did you just not sleep, or what's the secret here, Chelsea?
No, sleep is very important. And actually, it's my number one non-negotiable. You can ask my husband. Don't wake me up. But I do want to make it clear too. We work 14 hours a day when we have guests on board, which is not all the time. When we do not have guests on board, it's more of like an 8 to 5 kind of schedule. And when we are crossing oceans, we rotate through an on watch schedule. So you're typically on watch for I'll round it off and say 3-hour shifts per day. And the people that are in charge of, the captain and the officers, they usually have more responsibility. But when you cross an ocean, you have many, many days where you're only seeing sky and water, and being out in that vastness really, at least for me, I mean, I think it's very obvious that I'm a deep thinker and I'm a hard worker, right? These are two things that just run through my veins. So being out in the middle of the ocean, it's amazing when you just allow yourself the serenity to get quiet, what starts to come through intuitively and from your heart and soul. And I'll never forget it. We were crossing on Loyalty. So it had to have been to the Caribbean. And I don't know, we were crossing the Atlantic Ocean one way or the other. And it was sort of one of those same things. It was, especially in the yoga industry, I had seen people who were life coaches. And again, it was that same like, oh, I'll never be a life coach. That's like, what the hell is that? Are you a therapist? Are you not a therapist? I kind of was like a hater about it, which was the same thing that I felt about yoga teachers. I was like, who do you think you are? Like, I don't know. Again, the things that we're resistant to is typically probably mirroring to us where we have some type of desire within us, but we just feel inadequate, right? Or we have some type of fear of failure. So I thought, you know what, maybe I can explore this in another way. I mentioned I always wanted to be a doctor. Nutrition is always something. I thought about doing sports therapy. There's been a lot of times in my life where trying to figure out what I'm doing with my life has obviously been about letting go of what I think I need to be doing and just putting together the pieces of my heart. And nutrition and science and the human body, and really, especially through the practice of yoga, understanding the connection between mind, body, and spirit. So now here I am understanding like our physical body is 1000% a relation to how we are feeling, our emotions, which also determine our spiritual connection, right? It's the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So if we are feeling lacking in one area of our life, we most likely will suffer in our career, in our relationships, in our finances, and our connection to the divine, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was an opportunity for me to start piecing some of these things together. So I started just getting on Google and started looking up coaching, and health coaching in particular really resonated more with me than life coaching, because I thought, right, I can learn nutrition and I can tie that in with becoming, with my psychology degree of understanding human behavior, and also back it up with my experience as a yoga teacher. So yeah, I mean, it was basically Google and then the process of just finding the school that I wanted to. And then in between jobs or in between guest trips or, just whenever I had opportunities, maybe I would take a holiday and take 2 weeks off. I would just dive into my studies. So I started studying online, and I got a certification in health and life coaching through the Health Coach Institute. And over the last 2 years, I've allowed myself to transition off of the really big yachts that require a lot more of me to more of the smaller based family run where you have a little bit more free time opportunities. And if many people don't have these opportunities, but I think just because how I had aligned myself, the fact that I'm a US citizen, I had experience, I had big boat experience, I have also additional experience in addition to being basically a very professional housekeeper and bartender, which I had been doing for years and years and years. Obviously being in food and bev, when you are the help and you need to serve food and clean, it's a great asset to have. But I've basically just have over the last 2 years, I made a plan and how I can transition out of yabbing and into full-time coaching. So I spent the last 2 years doing contract work. And when I wasn't working during the day, I mean, kind of like the history of my whole life, I've always had 2 jobs. I was spending the other time making a plan for and building my health coaching business. So in November, when I took the dive, I had built a very comfortable cash cushion to feel comfortable thinking like, all right, if I'm at least not making the money that I was making in yachting monthly, then I can support myself for a few months. So yeah, it was strategic and it was planned, and entrepreneurship is definitely, I mean, here we are on a Sunday night working, you know, it's, you have to choose what works for you and then choose to show up. And I think this is a kind of a cool leeway into the power of saying no.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure we highlighted that process, because I think a lot of people, and not that you didn't like the yachting industry, you did like that, you enjoyed it, but your passion is, you know, this entire idea of health coaching and helping people. And I think a lot of people often wonder, you know, how do I go from one thing to something else? And I think the way you just explained that, I think will probably help a lot of people that listen to this. Yeah, I think your point is, like, you have to have a plan, you have to be strategic, you have to, you know, you have to save up money, and you have to your point, you put in the hard work and got the certification and did everything you needed to do to get ready for that moment to leave yachting and go be a full-time health coach. So I just want to say congrats, because that's a great story. And I think that's inspiring for a lot of people just to hear how you went through that process, because I think that's a lot of people have that dream, they just don't know how to get there, right? So
thank you, Nick. And I'll just add to that. Sorry, not to interrupt you. I just want to add to that, because I think a really important piece to all of it, and when you look back at my life, it kind of seems like, you know, over here and over there and over there, but really there's a main thread that leads you through the whole thing, and every left and right was a very clear stepping stone to the next thing. And inevitably, those stepping stones were completely necessary to get me to where I'm at now. And along the way, I felt deeply grateful for every stepping stone to yachting. Was amazing. And like I said, had I gotten into it earlier, I would have done it a lot longer. But now, being in my mid-30s, it's just that calling and desire within me. And then also understanding, like, man, I'm not that life is running out, God willing, I've got many more years, but like, I'm in my prime. I need to do this now. You know, where the whispers are so loud, you have to just take action. So giving myself permission to listen to those whispers, to trust my intuition, and to put one foot in front of the other to say, all right, well, I understand my limiting beliefs. So what can I do to make those limiting beliefs? And in my case, it's scarcity and fear of failure, to break through those in a way that feels safe enough to, like you said, when I do make that leap, I at least know that I have something to catch me. I'm not just diving into the deep end of the pool with no water in it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share that, because, and this is why I love interviewing people, because everyone's career journey is different. Like, no one has the same career journey. It's just not possible. And, you know, I love, like, a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed someone who owns a ranch, you know, out west in the US, right? I had never talked to someone before that owned a ranch. So every single time I meet someone, I interview people, their careers are so different. And, you know, you worked on super yachts. How many people do you know that can say that? It's just so cool, right? So it's just, I think it's beautiful to hear how your career journey went. And to your point, how you learned lessons throughout everything, right? All the way, and how you vividly remember your first yoga class freshman year of college in 2004, right? It's just funny how there are these influential, you know, times in our life. So before we get to the no piece, I just want to make sure you clarify for everyone here, as a health coach, like, if I wanted to hire you as a health coach, what does that mean? And why would I hire you? Just so people understand what you do every day. Because I think people have heard of life coaches, but maybe not health coaches as much.
Beautiful. And thank you for that question. Yeah. We like to say that we are masters of habit change, right? So we do have studies in nutrition. We are not certified nutritionists. We do have backgrounds in understanding the physiology of the body and all the different, you know, metabolic types and blood types, and, you know, what it means to eat for your body type. So, you know, we can direct you in the right direction, but even more so, we are masters of habit change, right? Because listen, at the end of the day, information does not equal transformation, right? Yeah. I could give you all of the diets out there in the world, and I always like to say we heal in health and we die when we diet, right? I could give you all the information, and maybe it'll work for like a week or 2 weeks, and you'll be like on the bandwagon and feeling good. But then inevitably, some kind of stressor comes into your life, and then you've fallen off track, you binge eat, you militant exercise, you do whatever coping mechanism you've learned to do your entire life to cope with that trauma or that stress. It's pulled you way too far away from your comfort zone. And any success that you've had is now, it's like pulling a rubber band too far from a pole. Eventually you're going to snap back. Either it's going to break or you're going to snap back. So we really are masters of habit change. So we do the masterful inquiry into what are the beliefs that are driving your habits, right? Because beliefs drive our thoughts. Thoughts are what feed our emotions, right? And emotions are inevitably why I keep doing the things that I'm doing, the habits that I keep leaning into, whether it's to cope or self-soothe or whatever it may be. It's because those emotions that I'm feeling, to reverse engineer, are being driven by some kind of thought loop in my brain that is inevitably stemming from my belief system. And those beliefs, when we can start to really rewrite our belief system, that is when we can start to change our identity, or what I like to say is change who we are being in the moment, right? If I just blindly go to cope and, say, I don't know, I just feel like eating is kind of an easy way, especially with a pandemic. We find ourselves coping with this unknowing and this trauma that we are experiencing right now amongst this COVID-19. We walk into the kitchen and we open the refrigerator and it's like, we're just mindless. We are not being mindful whatsoever. So it's a lot harder for me to eat an entire pizza if I'm going to approach it with mindfulness and say, you know what, I need some comfort right now. I need some ease. I need some convenience because everything else doesn't feel like that. So I'm going to order a pizza and I'm going to really eat it slowly and I'm going to do it mindfully because I'm really self-aware as to why I'm doing this. It's a lot easier to have one slice or two slices as opposed to just blindly be like, I'm stressed AF and I'm just going to try to cope. Right? Because listen, Nick, I could tell you all day, every day, if you're gluten intolerant and dairy, and lactose intolerant, that eating a cheesy pizza is not good for you. But is that going to change you from eating the pizza?
Right.
No, it's not.
Right. So I like that. I like how you describe it. It's really about, creating and forming new habits more than anything else. It's not just giving people the information, but it's helping them actually take action on that information is probably the best way to describe it.
Exactly. And of course, we have the tools in our toolbox to be able to help with certain, if someone is having struggles in their body, we can guide them towards down certain paths to have them have quick results. Like I've decided to specialize in gut health. So I have like the tools and the tips to be able to say, okay, here's a few things we can start doing right now for you to start feeling better. Yeah. And whilst we're doing that, we're going to get on the phone, 3 times a month, for example, in my high touch point group one-on-one program, and really dive deep into, well, what's really going on behind why you're not doing your action steps, or, why you're doing what you're doing. Who are you actually being, rather than, I care less about what it is that you're doing. I mean, I care about what you're doing because that's important information, but I care more so about who are you being in that moment that you are doing the thing. Are you punishing yourself, or are you leaning into saying yes to yourself?
No, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. So you just said yes. Now let's talk about no, because I feel that you personally have said no many times in your life, and it's ended up helping you in a positive way. And it sounds like with the health coaching, you end up helping people learn how to say no quite a bit by forming these new habits, right? Or these new ways of thinking and creating, I think to what you said earlier, kind of creating new emotions rather than, just like instant emotions based off of how someone might feel. So I've had a conversation with people about this before. I did a talk on this. I think people are afraid to say no for so many reasons. They think that saying no is rude. They think saying no is wrong. They think saying no is disrespectful. They're afraid to say no. There's just such a stigma around it. But the funny thing is, and I talked about this with someone, one of the first words you learn as a kid is often no. And why is it no, right? Because these little kids, and we're talking very little, quickly realize that if they learn the word no, they get a reaction and they have power. all of a sudden, right? So it's amazing to me how at such a young age, we figure out that no is very powerful and we use it.
Yep.
But then it's almost like we're trained over the upcoming number of years that no is bad and that we shouldn't say no. And that if you say no, you're letting someone down or you're disappointing someone. So I just I want to hear your thoughts on that and
Yeah.
why you think this word is so powerful and why you think this has helped you in your life and why it helps your clients.
Yes, definitely. Great point there, Nick. And, I feel like, I have some points that I want to offer, but to what you said as well, we have, and I'll say limiting belief. And if you don't understand what a limiting belief is, it's a belief that you are operating from that is not ultimately true. So for example, you said, well, people don't like to say no because they think that it's rude. Is that ultimately true? No.
No, most of the time it's not. No, I agree. It's about how you say it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the limiting belief is actually what is feeding the habit of constantly saying yes. And what I'll say here is people pleasing. And we're going to get to that in a moment. And, the habit of people pleasing is a really, it's an identity that you are operating from, because the belief is that if I don't say yes all the time to everyone, then I will no longer be safe, loved, or accepted. And these are the three things that every single human being needs on a survival level. We need to feel safe, first and foremost, with food and shelter and warmth and all of those things. We need to feel accepted by our peers because we are tribal creatures, right? If we don't feel accepted into the group, we all know that feeling of being left out. It's like, ugh, it goes straight to the heart. And to be loved, right? We have to feel loved, deeply loved. So we learned growing up, if someone, for example, if you're listening to this and you say, yeah, I really struggle saying no. Well, first and foremost, that's not your fault. So you can forgive yourself for that. It's coming from a behavior, it's coming from a pattern that you learned somewhere along the way from somebody in your life. So whether you saw it happen or someone taught you that saying no was rude and that was not the polite or sweet thing, little sweet girls, they just, for example, I went to school in the South. So this is something that we learned, as a sweet Southern girl, you just smile and nod. You don't kick up a fuss because heaven forbid we ruffle feathers. That's not good. So I just wanted to say that, right? So as a preface to what I'm about to teach quickly is, if you do find yourself in that pattern of people pleasing, I don't want you to feel guilty or shameful, right? This is the first step in self-awareness, is to forgive yourself and then give yourself the power to choose again, which starts with saying yes to yourself first. So I'll kind of dive in here, if that's okay.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that's a really good point, because I think a lot of people don't realize why they are afraid to say no, right? I think they don't know where it really comes from.
Yeah.
And I think some of the most successful people I know are the ones that actually have learned how to say no and do it in a way that people may not have even realized they said no, right? So I think it's all, again, it goes back to, I think, how you say it and why you say it, but I'll let you continue.
Awesome. Yeah, I even have a practice that I do, like an actual worksheet that I do with my clients, and it's how to ask for what you want and get it without looking like an a-hole, right? So it's kind of on that same terms. But first and foremost, I'll just say, if you're starting on the journey of learning how to say no and why and what that looks like, I just wanted to offer to you that when we start to implement this healthy boundary, because no is not it is a healthy boundary is what it is. You're basically giving yourself the freedom to clear the clutter, right? So let's look at a calendar. Let's look at someone who might be a full-time mother and a sales rep, and now she's working from home, but she just can't say no to anyone, right? She looks at her calendar and she is just like mind blown, right? So when you start saying no to commitments and obligations that are not in alignment with you and what you want to do, it's like taking out the old couch before buying a new one and bringing it in, right? You have to clear out some of that clutter. So, if we're always saying yes, there's just clutter everywhere. So this is also, clearing the clutter is one of the first exercises that I do with my clients, depending on where we're focusing on, right? pick one area of your house or one energetic area or your calendar or your email and start to unsubscribe, throw away the old furniture, throw away the expired foods, like clear out the clutter, because your your external environment is 100% a reflection of your internal environment. It's the same thing with your body, right? What your body is saying, the signs that it's giving you, the bloating, the rashes, the autoimmune symptoms, the discomfort that you might be feeling, that excess weight that you might be carrying, it's a reflection of what's happening on the inside. So I hope that in knowing that by starting to implement no, that you're actually just clearing out the clutter, it's kind of this feeling of like, oh, this is no longer a heavy burden. This is actually a freeing thing. This is something that's going to give me a lot more freedom in my life. So that's kind of my first point in why there's a lot of power in saying no, is because it gives us that freedom that we so long and desire for. So I think freedom is something that we all really want.
Yeah, no, and I love how you mentioned boundaries, because I completely agree. And when I spoke on this topic, that was one of the points that I made was, if you can't set boundaries, you're going to struggle as just a human in general, because ultimately, if you can't set boundaries, you're not saying no, right? So setting boundaries is another way, in my opinion, of saying no. And it's, like, well, that doesn't really align with my values, so I'm not going to do this. And that's setting a boundary as an example.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what are some tips for people that, like, how do you help your clients say no, maybe for the first time, right? So obviously you're not going to say no, you're not going to come out and have this huge decision and say no right away to the biggest possible thing. Like, a lot of people like maybe do baby steps on saying no, right? They say no to, like, to your point, they clear a calendar and say, you know what, I don't need to go to this meeting, or you know what, I don't want to meet with you. But what are your I love the decluttering, but what are some other tips you have for people to help them start saying no and understanding how to do it?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's important to understand the why, right? Again, like the information is not going to give you the transformation. If I just say, oh, just start saying no, that's like, so the transformation happens when you understand why it's important to start implementing this healthy boundary, right? So my second point there is that when you start to say no, it actually empowers you to now say yes only to the things that are in alignment to your true self, right? So we've all had that feeling of when we receive an invitation and we say yes and we feel expansive and excited and like, oh, this is an amazing opportunity. Like, you know that yes was a hard yes because it's in alignment with your goals and dreams and desires, right? We also know that feeling of when we've overcommitted and we've said yes, maybe to a social outing, and then we're like just dreading it, right? And it's constricting, right? So by learning how to say no in your authentic voice and doing it in a way that is clear, and I'm going to give some tips on that as well. But again, I think it's just important to understand the why. You're going to do it because then it empowers you to say yes to the things that you actually want to say yes to, which backs me up to my third point. And that is, when you start to implement no, quote unquote, in your life, you start to build internal trust, right? So Nick, let me ask you, like, somebody who makes a promise to you and then they keep it, what does that say about that person?
Yeah, you're clearly going to trust them more.
Exactly. They're trustworthy. So, and it goes the same way. If you make a promise and you break it, that person is not trustworthy. So think of all the times in your life because you had good intentions and you wanted to say yes, but then you had to cancel last minute or make up some BS excuse, or you didn't show up because you actually wanted to say no, but you said yes anyway. Now you are breaking the trust of that other person, but also the trust of yourself. So now you start feeling guilty and shameful because you think, man, like, I can't even trust myself, right? If I say yes to myself, I can't even trust that I'm going to show up for myself. So what's the point of even setting goals?
Because you should have said no to begin with instead of saying yes. No, I agree. I want to reiterate a point you made, that you have to understand your own values and what you believe in for this to work, because you can't set boundaries without knowing your own values. And I think people sometimes wonder, Chelsea, like, well, what does that mean? And I use examples of people with people like, if you got asked to do something at work and it seemed unethical, you have to know what your values are, right? Like, are you going to do it because your boss told you to do it, or are you going to listen to your values and say, this doesn't align with who I am? And you say, and you tell them you can't do it, right? So I feel a lot of people actually struggle saying no because they really don't understand their values.
Definitely. And there's a lot of value to taking the time to really say, and this was a lot of the self-development work that I did when it came time to launch my business, right? And as far as an entrepreneurial mindset, if you're trying to do it like somebody else, you've already set yourself up for failure. Yes, like learn the information, see what's working out there, but then align with what's true to you. So one of the first things that I did in building my brand and understanding my ideal clients that I want to work with is, I need to come up with my philosophies, my life values, so that way I am connecting with my ideal clients. So, one of my main philosophies in life is that we have to take accountability for our own life. So if somebody comes to me and is really kind of stuck in a victim mindset, it's probably not my ideal client, but that person won't be attracted to me and my work because I make it very clear that I am willing to work with you if you are interested in looking in the mirror and taking accountability, for lack of a better term, and pun intended as a gut health coach, for your own shit, like we got to look at it, even though that could be hard. It could be messy. It could stink real bad. All the puns intended, right? But doing it in a loving, safe container is really important, right? So I think another really important element to learning how to say no, and this is really the core of a lot of my work that I do, is it helps you trust your intuition, right? So intuition is a real thing. I've interviewed Naveen Jain, Intuitionology. I'm totally blanking on his name right now. Please forgive me. But anyway, there's science behind intuition, and it has been measured and it is real, and it's everything physiological in your body as far as taking in all the information in an instant and understanding when you are in danger or when you need to make a quick decision or, when you're pivoting something in your life. So when you start building that internal trust, when you start saying no to yourself and the things that are not aligned with your core values, in fact, it helps you to strengthen each time your gut instinct says, ooh, I feel this constricting feeling. This person just invited me to do this thing and it doesn't feel in alignment with me. I think I need to say no. And every time you flex that muscle, your intuition gets louder and louder and louder. So, if I think back on my life, if I had ignored the times in my life when my intuition was screaming at me, I would not have traveled the world and met the people I've met and done the things that I've done if I just ignored those callings and those whispers and I had to start saying yes to myself, which meant saying no to other things that are not in alignment.
I really like that the idea of saying yes to yourself helps you say no to everyone else, right? Because you can't say yes to everyone. So I want to say thank you again for you being on the show, because this is a fun hour. I always close with the same question for every guest, and that's what has helped you reach your full potential. So what has helped Chelsea be successful in your career, your very interesting, unique career? Like, what is that one thing you'd share with my audience and all the people that you coach? What's the secret?
Be relentless in the pursuit of your dreams. That's it.
That's it.
Be relentless in it. Do not apologize for your desires. Your desires are leading you towards your dharma. So though someone may have told you that the things that you desire in life are impossible, or you're not made for them, or you're not good enough, or all of those, again, those limiting beliefs and those negative self-talk, those self-sabotaging habits that want to keep you playing small, don't let it, right? And seek help, right? So reach out to me so we can talk about this more. And if you are a people pleaser and you're struggling in your health and you're struggling to manage your time and you're struggling to, feel good in your relationships because you're really just giving it all, right? I always say we cannot pour from an empty cup. We can only pour from a full cup. The cup has to overflow, and then we give from the overflow. So please reach out to me if you're struggling with these things. And if you are on a journey to entrepreneurship, and all of us in some way are on a journey to that happiness, right? And I can really say now what has helped me get there is being relentless in that pursuit of happiness every single day and every moment, and being relentlessly self-aware, even at times that it was hard, being relentless in the pursuit of whatever I was trying, whatever block was holding me back to get me to where I want to be. And that's what I would encourage you to do as well. Just be relentless, whether it's a health journey or a business journey or a relationship, whatever it is. I grew up Irish Catholic, so we learned that desires were like a really bad thing. You're not allowed to have desires. And I'm here to tell you that that's total bullshit. That's a limiting belief. Is it ultimately true? Hell no. And your desires are leading you towards your dharma. So say yes to those things, which might mean saying no to all the other things in your life that are keeping you playing small.
Yeah, no, great advice. I love the relentless advice. And again, I appreciate you making time. For anyone that's looking to connect with you, again, we'll make sure we link. It's chelseahainescoaching.com. We'll link to that in the YouTube description, the podcast description. We'll link to your LinkedIn as well. You can follow Chelsea on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook.
Yep.
Right.
I'm all the things. Yep.
You're on all the things. So
yeah.
Thank you. It was a great conversation. It was a lot of fun. I think hopefully people learned quite a bit tonight about you and your journey and what a health coach is and what a super yacht is and how to say no. And it was a wide ranging discussion. So I appreciate you making time.
Yeah, of course, it's an honor, and I would love to offer an invitation for anybody who might be listening to this. This coming week is actually pre-launch for a spring gut health reset program that I'm doing. If you've never worked with a health coach before, this is a great place to start. It's a group offering. I only launch it 3 times a year, and it's an opportunity to work one-on-one with me, as well as have a community. It's a much more affordable rate because it's a group setting. And I think crawling out of this pandemic, hitting reset on mind, body, and soul is extremely important. So it is an inflammatory elimination journey where we will hit reset on our gut health. But of course, I think that I am all about mind, body, soul connection. So there's Ayurvedic practices. We dive deep into really practicing saying no to all of the things that are keeping us feeling sick and tired. So if you're feeling sick and tired, there's an invite-only pre-launch special that's happening this week. So if you get in touch with me over the next 7 days, whether through my website, through Instagram, or my email, you can find them all on my website, chelseahainescoaching.com, and I will send you that personal invite. Of course, there's only limited spaces for it, but I'd love to make it happen for you. And the pre-launch is a discounted price for the launch, which happens next week.
Yeah, your passion definitely shines as you talk about this. I can feel the energy through the video chat. So again, thank you again. I wish you the best with everything with your business during this very challenging time with COVID-19, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thanks for everybody for tuning in.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Have a great one.